The slap didn't hurt half as much as the silence that followed. There, in the middle of a glowing room, filled with laughter, champagne, and the illusion of perfection, his hand met my face like a curtain drop. It wasn't rage, it was calculation. Cold, controlled. A public display of ownership gone wrong. Gasps scattered like glass on marble. Eyes darted away. Some froze, some blinked in disbelief. But no one moved. Not right away. And me? I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I picked up my glass, steadied my breath, turned toward the guests, and smiled. "To Camilla," I said, raising the flute high. My voice didn't shake, forgiving him what I clearly couldn't. The room exhaled. Ethan's face drained of color. Camilla, standing 2 bodies behind him, froze mid-sip. Champagne sloshed in her glass. He thought I wouldn't find out. He thought I'd stay silent. He thought wrong, because betrayal hurts, humiliation scars. But nothing fuels a woman like the final snap of denial giving way to truth. And in that moment, I didn't just toast his mistress. I burned down his mask. People started whispering, shifting. One woman quietly turned and walked away. Another set her glass down, untouched. Someone coughed. Helena, my sister, stepped beside me like armor, hand brushing my back, steadying my spine. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Ethan reached for me, voice low. "Don't do this." I looked him in the eye. My cheek still burned. But what burned deeper was everything he thought he'd buried beneath a smile. All the years of manipulation. The lies. The gaslighting wrapped in compliments. I turned to him, still holding the glass. "You already did." Then I walked out, head high, heel sharp, heart pounding. I didn't look back, not even once. Because that wasn't the night I broke. It was the night I woke up. I met Ethan when I was 24, and thought confidence looked like a man who never asked questions, just gave answers. He walked into the art gallery I worked at with a Rolex and a crooked smile, and within a week, he was buying paintings. He didn't understand, and making me feel like the most interesting woman in the room. He said I had depth, that I was unlike anyone he'd ever met. Back then, I lived in a tiny apartment with peeling paint and big dreams. He made me feel chosen, special, like I was being pulled into a life I never knew I deserved. And I let him. He didn't rush. He studied me, my fears, my family, my ambition. He found the threads and wrapped them gently around his fingers. Our first fight was about a dress, too tight, too short, too loud. "I just don't want other men looking at you like that," he said. "You're mine." It sounded like protection. He never yelled, never shoved. He was too refined for that. His control came in whispers, in compliments that curved into commands, in gifts that came with invisible strings. "You don't need to work," he said. "I've got you." And it felt like love. When we married, people called us a power couple. I had the poise. He had the empire. Together we hosted fundraisers and galas, photographed perfectly, always polished. No one saw the way my voice softened around him, how I deferred, how I disappeared inch by inch. He'd correct me in public, subtly. "She didn't mean that," he'd laugh. Or, "What she's trying to say is," I laughed too, because arguing in front of people was embarrassing. And I learned early that my silence was safer than his anger. But I loved him. God, I loved him. I loved the version of him I met in that gallery. The one who looked at me like I held the stars. I kept hoping that man would come back. I kept trying to be the woman he first adored. We had years like that, glossy on the outside, fragile underneath. I lost track of how many times I told myself, "He's stressed, It's the pressure. It'll get better. But the truth is, it didn't get worse overnight. It got worse in slow motion. I stopped painting. Stopped hosting without his approval. Stopped wearing red because he said it made me look too much. And I stopped talking about my dreams because he never asked. And eventually, neither did I. The slap didn't come from nowhere. It was the final punctuation at the end of a sentence I'd spent a decade writing in silence. At first, the red flags looked like love. He wanted to know where I was for my safety. He asked to manage our finances, to take the pressure off me. He disliked certain friends because they were a bad influence. I thought it was care. It was caging. He hated when I disagreed with him in public. "You're embarrassing yourself," he'd whisper through gritted teeth. Once, after a gala, he held my wrist in the car just a second too long. Didn't squeeze, just held. Enough to make the message clear. You smile, you behave, you play. Your part. He didn't like my sister, Helena. Said she was too opinionated, too loud. Translation. She saw through him. Every time she visited, he'd mysteriously develop a headache or an urgent work call. He wanted me isolated, wrapped in his approval, dependent on his mood. He hated when I wore lipstick to dinners. Why are you dressing up? Who are you trying to impress? I started toning myself down. Duller colors, simpler makeup, easier to digest. He praised me for being classy again. I didn't realize I was dimming my light just to keep his ego from burning. He criticized my cooking in front of guests, joked about how I'd burn water if he let me near a stove unsupervised. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. Because if I didn't, the silence afterward would be louder than the joke itself. Sex became transactional. Praise when I obeyed. Cold shoulders when I didn't. He had a language made of glances, sighs, and silence. No bruises, just emotional erosion. And I became fluent in reading his moods before I spoke. He started staying out later, new clients, new partners. He'd come home smelling like another world, not perfume, but distance. I'd ask gently. He'd snap, "Don't start, you're paranoid." And I'd shrink again, because doubting him meant doubting my judgment, and I'd bet everything on him. There were rumors. Camilla's name came up once or twice. She was at every event. Too close, too available, I asked once. "She's just ambitious," he said. "Don't be insecure." That word, insecure, he weaponized it like a sword. I began second-guessing myself at every turn. He'd disappear mid-conversation, mid-dinner, emotionally evaporate. My thoughts became lonely, my opinions unwelcome. I was a set piece in his perfect world, beautiful and silent. And if I ever broke the role, he'd remind me with a look who I belonged to. He never apologized. He reworded, reframed, made me the problem. "You're too sensitive, too emotional, too much." I started believing it. Started questioning my memory, my truth, my worth. But something in me was still watching, still documenting, not with a notebook, but with my soul, quietly storing every moment for the day I'd finally stop pretending. That day was coming. I just didn't know how loud it would be. The night of the charity gala was supposed to be flawless. Ethan had rehearsed his speech, picked out my dress, even corrected my posture before we left. "Stand tall," he said. "You're representing us." He meant him. I was just the backdrop. Camilla was already there when we arrived, dressed like the future, confident like a woman who already had what she wanted. I caught the way Ethan looked at her. Too long, too familiar. Something coiled in my gut. Not jealousy, recognition. I excused myself and went to the restroom, hands trembling. I opened his phone while it sat charging in his coat pocket. He never thought I'd look. He thought I was too obedient, too broken, too trained. But I remembered the passcode. The messages were there, clear, intimate, repetitive. I can't wait to see you again. You looked stunning last night. She's too distracted to notice. They dated back months. Photos, hotel receipts, voice notes. She'd been in our house, on our couch, in our bed. My hands didn't shake anymore. My body went still. Like rage had frozen everything into focus. I didn't cry. I copied the messages, forwarded them to myself. Walked back into the room with a smile on my lips and a storm in my chest. He was laughing with donors, swirling his drink like he hadn't just shattered our vows in private. He kissed my temple when I rejoined him, eyes scanning the room like a king surveying his kingdom. He had no idea I was holding the blade behind my back. Then it happened. He tried to correct me, again, mid-sentence. I laughed, not politely, sharp, real. He leaned in, hissed, "Stop making a scene." I met his eyes and said, "Why don't you go check your messages?" That's when it snapped. His hand moved faster than his brain. A slap, not hard, but loud. Enough to turn heads, enough to freeze the room. Time fractured. All eyes on us. Champagne paused in midair. Laughter died mid-throat. My cheek stung. My pride didn't. I picked up my glass, turned to the crowd. "To Camilla," I said, voice clear, strong, for giving him everything I couldn't, and for finally setting me free. The silence that followed was seismic. He looked at me like I'd detonated a bomb, and I had, because his secret wasn't secret anymore, and I was done keeping it for him. The drive home was silent. I didn't go with him. Helena took my hand and led me out of that room like I was a wounded animal, shielding me from the stares, from the pity, from the cameras I knew were already flashing. My face burned, not from the slap, but from the shame of having worn that marriage like a badge for so long. I sat in her car, staring out the window, dress wrinkled, hair falling, makeup smudged, not from tears, but from truth. I felt hollow. Like everything I had built to survive in that house had suddenly collapsed. Because it had. The version of me that obeyed was gone. Dead on arrival. At home, I couldn't sleep. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at the faint pink mark on my cheek. I traced it, memorized it. Not because it hurt, but because I knew it would be gone in hours. And I didn't want to forget. Because what came with it, the violence, the betrayal, the humiliation, that was going to last. Ethan didn't come home that night. He didn't call, didn't text. I waited up anyway, not because I wanted him to come back, but because I wanted to see what kind of man could hit his wife in front of dozens of people and still sleep at night. He walked in the next morning like nothing had happened. No apology, no explanation. Just, "We need to talk about last night." I stared at him in disbelief. "Last night?" I repeated. "You hit me." He rolled his eyes. "You embarrassed me." That was it, the phrase that sealed it. He wasn't sorry. He was inconvenienced. Told him to get out. He refused. Said it was his house too. So I left instead. Packed a bag, took my laptop, my journals, my truth. Helena opened her guest room without hesitation. "As long as you need," she said. And I believed her. I spent days numb. I answered no calls. I avoided every headline. I lived in silence, trying to piece together how I'd become the woman I used to pity. The one who smiled through clenched teeth and said, "It's not that bad." But the truth kept echoing. It was that bad. It had been for years, and I had been trained to normalize it. That was the hardest part. Not the slap, not the affair, but realizing how many times I had betrayed myself to protect him. That's when the grief came. Not for him, but for the woman I used to be. I needed the truth like air, not just about Camilla, but about everything. I started digging, not with vengeance, but with clarity. I needed to know how long I had been living in a house built on lies, and what I found cracked open every illusion I'd clung to. The phone records were easy. His name was still on our shared account. I traced the numbers. Camilla's mostly, but not just hers. There were others, women from other cities, names that didn't appear in our circle, some saved under fake business contacts. My stomach turned. Hotel receipts, hidden credit card charges, a storage unit I never knew about. Inside, gifts, lingerie with tags, a silk robe embroidered with C-framed photos. He was planning a double life, or maybe he'd already been living it. I felt like a ghost haunting my own marriage. Emails revealed more. Promises. Lies. She doesn't suspect a thing. She's too worried about appearances. I wasn't just betrayed. I was mocked. My devotion had become his alibi. My silence, his stage. I met with a lawyer, a woman. Sharp eyes, soft voice. She didn't flinch when I told her what happened. Just nodded and said, "Good. You're here early. You'll have options." She gave me paperwork, a plan, power. It felt like breathing for the first time in weeks. Helena helped me organize everything. "He's smart," she said. "But he's arrogant. That's where he'll lose." And she was right. Ethan never expected I'd fight. He thought I'd retreat, hide, crumble under the weight of shame. But I wasn't ashamed anymore. I was awake. I looked through old photos, red carpets, anniversaries, vacations. His hand on my waist like possession. My eyes dull behind perfect. Eyeliner. How did I miss it? How did no one tell me I was disappearing? I found an old journal from before him. My handwriting was bolder, my dreams bigger. I used to paint, dance barefoot in the living room. I used to have opinions. That journal became my blueprint. I wasn't building a case against him. I was building my way back to me. The final blow came in a voicemail from Camilla. "I didn't know he'd hurt you. I didn't know you were still in the picture." Her voice cracked, and I believed her. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew the only person who ever promised to protect me was Ethan. And he was the one who shattered me. I saved every file, backed it up 3 times, because this wasn't just divorce. It was evidence, and I wasn't his wife anymore. I was his witness. The moment I filed for divorce, I felt lighter. Not free yet, but closer. The papers were served during one of his meetings, in front of his partners. I made sure of it. Not out of cruelty, but out of calculation. He built his power on image. I knew where to strike. He called me an hour later, furious. "You're overreacting," he said. "This isn't how adults handle things." I let him rant. Then I said, "I handled it the way you taught me, quietly, precisely, and with evidence." Silence. I hung up. My lawyer sent him a curated packet. Infidelity proof, financial deceit, emotional abuse. It was all there. Chronological, undeniable. He tried to negotiate, to threaten. I didn't flinch. He was unraveling. The man who once controlled every room couldn't even control the narrative anymore. Camilla issued a public statement. Simple, sharp. I wasn't aware he was still married. I've cut all contact. The tabloids picked it up. The headlines changed. CEO faces scandal after gala assault. I didn't comment. I didn't have to. Truth doesn't need to scream. The final event was a charity dinner I had once co-chaired, with him. This time, I walked in alone. Hair high, dress stunning, my head held higher. Whispers filled the room, some sympathetic, some judgmental. I walked straight through them like a woman who no longer owed anyone an explanation. One of his board members approached me. "I'm sorry," he said. "We all saw it. None of us knew what to do." I looked him in the eye and replied, "The right thing. That's always the answer." He nodded, eyes down. The crowd parted when Ethan entered. His posture was tight, smile forced. I didn't look away. I didn't hide. I raised a glass, this time not in spite, but because I was the woman who stood in fire and walked out radiant. My speech was short, just a thank you to those who stood by truth. And a reminder, you can measure a person's strength not by what they endure, but by what they refuse to excuse. Ethan didn't speak that night. He left early. I stayed, laughed, danced, signed the final decree the next morning, hands steady, because revenge didn't come in rage. It came in reclaiming every piece of me he tried to silence. Freedom didn't arrive all at once. It came quietly. In mornings where I woke without dread. In nights where silence wasn't a threat. I moved through my home barefoot, no longer worried about who was watching, judging, controlling. I filled the space with music, with color, with me. I started painting again. It felt awkward at first, like using muscles I hadn't moved in years. But then it became oxygen. I splashed reds and golds across the canvas like I was reclaiming every inch of emotion I'd buried beneath politeness and survival. Helena helped me redecorate. We burned old linens, donated his books, laughed while dismantling his office. There was a ceremony in it, a symbolic cleansing, not of a man, but of the version of myself who kept choosing him over me. I changed my name back. The moment the judge approved it, I cried. Not because I missed the marriage, but because I had forgotten how good my own name felt in my mouth, how powerful it sounded on paper. My therapist said, healing isn't about pretending it didn't happen. It's about remembering who you were before it did. I carry that sentence everywhere, like armor, like a vow to myself. People still ask questions, whisper, how did it get that bad? Why did she stay? I don't answer them. I don't owe anyone the roadmap of my pain. But sometimes when I see another woman dimming her voice at a dinner table, I look her in the eye and I see her. I've started speaking at women's centers, quietly, privately. Just my story. No shame, no tears, just truth. I end every talk with the same words. This wasn't heartbreak, it was awakening. Every time someone nods like I've said the thing they didn't have language for. Ethan hasn't tried to reach out. His silence is a gift. Camilla disappeared too, back into the social ether. I hold no anger for her. She was just a mirror of everything I refused to see for too long. Sometimes I reread my journals, the ones from the early days. I don't recognize that woman anymore, but I thank her. She endured what I couldn't see until the end. And she led me here. Here, where my laughter is loud, where I eat dinner barefoot on the couch, where I toast to myself every night I feel peace. Because yes, he slapped me in front of everyone. But I raised my glass, and I never put it down again.